Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our full council today, Tuesday, the 16th of September. Item 1 on our agenda is declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? Councillor Roger?
Yeah, I'd like to declare an
item number 15, non-pecuniary, item 15 as executive vice chair of this city, and of which remain in the room, but I would not vote on this item.
Thank you very much. Item 2 on our agenda, a meeting, previous meeting minutes. Are there any issues or corrections required for those minutes, please? No, then could I have a proposer for their adoption? That's Councillor Nixon and seconded Councillor Mumford. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Item 3 on our agenda are chairman's announcements. I just have one announcement. I'd like to warmly welcome Sue Ross, who has been appointed our interim director for Children's Services and Adult Services, and she joins us for our first council meeting. So a very, very warm welcome to you, Sue. Thank you very much. Item 4 on our agenda, consideration of any questions received under Standing Order 14. I have none. Item 5, motions received in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. Item 6 was to receive draft minutes from committees for information only. And item 7, urgent items, which again I have none. So we move into part 1. Item 8 on our agenda is the first of our planning applications for the town hall. Firstly, from Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this application is brought back to members as the Town Hall is a council-owned building, and following members' support for the proposal in July, the decision was referred to the Secretary of State for a formal decision. The Planning Casework Unit, on behalf of the Secretary of State, has now confirmed that because Historic England have not raised any concerns with the amended proposal, the decision falls back to this council for a decision. There are no further changes relative to the proposal as considered in July. And on that basis, we're recommending members now grant listed building consent for the reasons set out in the report.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for the clarification around the approval of this proposal, and I will propose the recommendations.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Peacock. All those in favour of the application? That's carried, unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. Item 9 is the second of our planning applications, which is land adjacent to the waste site on Tresco, and in your hands. Thank you again, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just firstly a correction. I think on the title page of the report it says P25067 and I think it's 063. This application is referred to full council for decision as the applicant relates to a business of a serving council of this authority. The proposal is for the erection of a materials and machine store, which is to support the construction and maintenance activities on the island of Tresco. The proposed building is a large agricultural style building that features a number of sustainability measures and is designed to minimise visual impact and landscape harm. You will note that the scale of the building at 380 square metres triggers the requirement to deliver 10% increases in measurable biodiversity net gain, and suitable habitat has been identified to address this. No policy conflict or harm has been identified, and subject to the conditions set out, the proposal is recommended for approval. So just to also add that post-publication of the report, amended plans have been received that includes 4 large rainwater harvesting tanks. These are proposed along the north gable of the building. So although these have been on the website since last week, we haven't formally reconsulted the application on the basis that these align with the underlying sustainability strategy of the local plan. So we are comfortable that they're acceptable. Also, post-publication of the report, the applicant has provided a biodiversity game plan, and that's resulted in a minor change to condition C5. If members are happy, I can deal with that as a minor change under recommendation 2. But the application is still recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, that's great about the rainwater. I was going to ask about water conservation, seeing as it's going to be quite a big roof, and it'll be a pity to not catch that stuff, catch that water. I noticed the BNG, 10% BNG is 10 trees, basically. Is that it for
Yeah.
BNG?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So that's nice and simple. I think it's pretty straightforward. I propose a recommendation.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Grottick, please.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. All those in favour? That's carried, unanimous. Thank you very much. And item 10 is the last of our planning applications. Again, in your hands, Lisa, for Carnguavel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this application is brought to members as the site is a council-owned building. So the proposal relates to minor alterations to Carnguavel Health and Wellbeing Centre, including installation of 3 new windows, a new external door canopy, and the removal of 1 roof light. The works are intended to improve the functionality of the building without impacting its use and as a community facility. The report concludes that the proposal is low impact, preserves the character of the conservation area and complies with relevant planning policies, and planning permission is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus.
This is pretty minor. Nothing more to say. Let's get on with it. I propose a recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Legg. All those in favour? It's carried, unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lisa. Item 11 on our agenda is the workforce and skills strategy, which I think Avril will briefly introduce. Thank you.
I think Joe's doing it.
Yes, but I think Avril's just going to introduce it first, and then Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a workforce and skills strategy which is set out a 10-year vision for inclusive and future-ready workforce combined with Cornwall. I'd like to ask Joe to present the paper now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so as Avril said, this is the updated Cornwall and the Ailsa City Workforce and Skills Strategy, and it builds on the 2021 version and sets out the 10-year vision, which responds to both local priorities and national expectations. The strategy lays the foundation for future workforce investment and delivery, ensuring the region is ready to meet new challenges and opportunities. It's been endorsed by key governance bodies, including the Cornwall and Ailsa City Workforce and Skills Board, the Economic Forum, the Executive Group and the Leadership Board. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Joe. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is not so much a question as a comment, but obviously respond if you would like to. Just to say that the Chair and I attended a wide-ranging discussion at the Economic Forum at the end of July, and the Council is also represented on the Employment and Skills Board, where this has been discussed in some depth. It's a very detailed piece of work. All I would say, as you will note in the report, firstly, that the executive summary on page 58, in my humble opinion, is excellent. It's very clear, it's very concise, and it sets out the detail. One thing that I would mention on page 58 is that it is recommended or suggested at paragraph 3.7 that Scilly might benefit from a good business charter. Speaking personally, I would only say that I do feel we must look carefully at whether the benefits will outweigh the officer time, and we need to make sure that signing up to a charter such as this will have practical relevance for our particular community and council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grottick. Councillor Mumford, please. Okay. Councillor Marcus.
So it's great. What does this actually mean for us? Because there's a lot of, it's quite Cornwall-centric, the strategy, which you'd understand, because it's mainly written because we're only a small island off the end of Cornwall. So what in terms of practicality and actions, what does this mean?
Yeah, so I think sort of we're at the beginning of a journey, sort of restarting a journey potentially right now, because the funding landscape has changed so much over the last couple of years in particular. So we had ESF, which was replaced by Shared Prosperity Fund, which is coming to an end next year, which we don't know if it's going to be replaced with anything or not. So I think at this point, it's just important for us to be at the table. So we are, we've made sure that we are included in the strategy so that we can access funds if possible, if funds become available. So I think the challenge for us is going to be making sure that we're represented at we are represented by officers and members at the Workforce and Skills Board, so that we can be sort of part of the conversation. And then following that, there's going to be a measurable action plan which will come out of this strategy. So I think it's really important that the Isles of Scilly are part of that and represented in that action plan, so that it can be measured.
Okay, that action plan will make up part of your department's action plan as well, or is that going to be something separate? Is that like an action plan for the strategy itself?
Yeah, action plan for the strategy itself.
And that's going to be some location-specific stuff for us to carry out that. And I was going to ask, how can members help embed this as well? What do you want us to do?
Yeah, I just think by making sure that we've got proper representation at the board, the Workforce and Skills Boards and any other boards and forums on the mainland.
And I think the other thing for me is the ground, is what does the community need and want in terms of support for workforce and skills on the islands? Because I think sometimes we're around the table, but we are a quiet voice because we're not quite sure what we need. So we did some work previously around apprenticeships and all those things, and there's some work we brought to scrutiny. So I think it's just been really clear about what do we really need for these islands, and then we can represent those views at those boards and make sure where we can access funding that we might not otherwise get without being alongside Cornwall as a partner.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, more comments and observations and questions. I'd share Councillor Marcus's observations. I'd like to have seen more silly specific references in there, but I totally take Nicola's point as well, and I was just going to again highlight some of the areas which I think when we have our corporate plan discussions about what we want as our priorities, we can perhaps cascade into the wider conversation. So I just scribbled down the post-16 discussions, those sorts of debates, how we can prepare young people and give them the options and pathways which suit their needs best. The whole apprenticeship conversations, making sure that we are fighting that. I know there's been sort of financial disparities between some of those routes and pathways, so make sure that's bottomed out. I'm keen to see the careers conversations develop, and there's talking here about getting in earlier to offer some of that support and guidance. And again, that's not just school-aged. I'd like to see that rolled out to wider community as people look at career options. Pleased to see reference to SEND, and I think we need to push a little bit on NEAT as well. For us living offshore, there's the issues of accessing some of the training to make sure that it might only be 40 odd miles away, but it's affordable and accessible, so making sure that's there. And something else I scribbled, which I can't actually read, which can't have been very exciting. Yeah, that was all from me.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
I absolutely think we should be at the table on this one. I think that one of the problems we have here is I don't think the islanders are, in general, I would say, quite well skilled. It's just we haven't got many openings to use them, really. I mean, most of the jobs over here are low productivity, and if they're low productivity, they have to get paid well. So we do need to be at the table to basically ram this point home all the time. It's a bit easier for Cornwall to introduce high productivity jobs than here, because it's bigger. You can get bigger units and things, and it's a very small place, and it's very difficult to do that. But I mean, we have got, I know we hear about it on and off, potentially quite highly skilled engineering jobs coming up if they actually do put the wind farms, etc., out into the, I always get it the wrong way around, it's Celtic or Celtic Sea, isn't it? Yeah. And one's a football team. But if we could be making some for that, there's loads and loads of opportunities and things like that. So we just need to be at the table, but we also need to be realistic that jobs over here tend to be fairly low productivity and fairly low paid, and that's what we've got to be working at. It's not so much the skills we lack, it's the openings to apply the skills.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon, did you have your light on? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Sims and Councillor Williams have stolen half my thunder of things I was going to say. The only point I'd like to make now really is following from what Councillor Grottick said about the Good Business Charter. Regardless of whether we have one on Scilly, it would be a useful piece of work to find out which employers and which jobs actually have the foundation living wage. Because aspirationally, even though we have a lot of low-paid jobs, if we have an understanding of who's low-paid and how low they're paid, helps us support the community.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, just to say, sorry, previously in the last, well, I'm going to say the last administration, but before May, before I moved on to lead member for environment, I did attend these meetings in, which is the formation of the strategy. And I think it's really important that we are in the room because we were able to pick up on what funding is available, but also really do a lot of networking with stakeholders. And I think through that system, we are able to make sure we maximise what we get for the islands.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so do I have a proposer, please, for the adoption of this paper? Councillor Mumford.
I'd like to propose.
Seconder, please. Councillor Nixon. All those in favour? Thank you very much for adopting the strategy. Thank you. And thank you, Joe, very much for your paper. Thank you. Item 12 on our agenda is the Housing Service Annual Complaints Performance and Service Improvement Report in the hands of Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. So members will know that we have this Housing Ombudsman Complaints Handling Code. It's a mandatory code that applies to all social landlords, which was introduced in the 2020. We're required to do an annual self-assessment, and that self-assessment is set out at Appendix A, and also to produce an annual report based on any complaints, performance improvements, service improvement plan. Your role as council is to scrutinise that work, and in paragraph 5 of the report, I've listed out the 6 areas that are considered to be best practice in terms of scrutiny. Of those areas, the first point looks at whether our complaints policy is compliant with the National Good Practice, which it is because we updated it recently at Council, and that's set out at Appendix A. So that's referenced in our self-assessment. The other elements of that review look at whether the quality and quantity of responses to complaints have been reviewed and we've responded effectively, and hope that we've responded effectively to Ombudsman complaints relating to non-compliance or other complaints, of which we've had none. But you'll remember earlier in the year we did bring a review of the complaints handling process, which is where we updated the feedback policy for the council and our self-assessment. So I think last year we were slightly behind programme, so I think this was brought to council in May and June, but we're already, this report relates to the period 24-25, so which is our response to the Ombudsman is due by September. Last year we should have had a response by September, we didn't send it till May or June, so we're getting ahead of the game in response to the Ombudsman's findings last time, which were about being too slow in getting this work done. So we're now back in sync, I would say. The only aspect that you need to consider really in detail is whether self-assessment is up to date and compliant. And I think Councillor Marcus and I have had a couple of discussions about perhaps 1 or 2 points that need updating still. Although it was only adopted in May, our response might need updating slightly, and we'll come to that in a moment. So I think the report here today is for noting and to approve the self-assessment at Appendix A, but I'd welcome some comments from Councillor Marcus, because I think we've picked up on 1 or 2 things that might need updating still. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I just draw your attention to page 121, points 9.5 and 9.6 about the member responsible for complaints. And I think this has to be an actual member of the governing body, so I would propose that our lead member for housing takes that role. You're welcome. Yeah, if we can, I'll propose a recommendation subject to those amendments.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus, for that honour. Yeah, happy to take that on, part of the role, and I'll second the proposals.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sims, please.
I was going to actually second it, but I was just going to make the point that we've got 27 pages here, not about housing delivery or performance, but just about complaints, and obviously we have to pass it. But you know, local authorities have hundreds of things like this they have to do, and it just and this type of thing, which I think is possibly superfluous to needs, makes running a local authority increasingly difficult. So I'm just sort of registering my despair at the amount of possibly superfluous paperwork we have.
Thank you very much. Well, I have a proposer and seconder for the approval of this. All those in favour, please. It's carried unanimous again. Thank you very much, Nicola, for your paper. Item 13 on our agenda is proposed changes to commercial property lease arrangements. Again, in your hands, Nicola. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a really useful piece of work that's been done actually, because we did the strategic asset management review, and if you remember, there's a number of recommendations within that, including our acquisitions and disposal policy being updated. But another recommendation in there was for us to review our leases. And we have 23 commercial leases, and the recommendation within that strategic asset management review was to standardise those leases to help everybody really in the process, not only the council, but those tenants that we are landlord to. So as part of that standardisation, it was recommended that we review the rent review process, so simplify it, but also look at the tenancy agreements themselves. There are two key proposed changes that we're suggesting, and these are set out in paragraph 7. One is to standardise the leases. So in terms of looking at best practice, are they robust? Are they transparent? Are they legally compliant? Have they got the right level of detail in them? Are they clear? Is it clear about maintenance and repair and health and safety, etc.? And also to review the annual rents, to review the way we do rent reviews, because currently, and you'll remember we had an issue here at council a few weeks ago where we uplifted rents on a 5-year cycle, and suddenly there's a massive hike in rents for people to consider. So rather than doing that every 5 years, the suggestion on the new leases is that that's done annually. And we follow the social rent principles, which is CPI plus 1%. So there's some simplification of process and methodology here that we're putting forward for you today. And the reason why it's quite urgent is because we have a number of leases that currently need updating at Gleaner, the 3 commercial leases there, and also the lease for the community venture at the PEC. So it seems timely to have a look at the heads of terms that we have at the moment. We've sought legal advice. I think this will provide us with a much simpler, transparent process where people will be really clear about what's in their lease, but also what to expect in terms of rent review. So the recommendations are set out on page 123, which is to approve the proposed updates to the structure of the new commercial leases, including an annual increase to rents of CPI plus 1%. So the recommendation is there for you on page 123. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. I'm all for simple, as you know. So I generally approve of this. My only kind of slight concern is that the reason we have these valuations periodically is to set the rent based on the value of the property. Now, if the value of some of these properties were to drop, if we were to have a property crash, we would, basically, if we keep putting the rent up, so there needs to be a kind of fallback thing there. But I think we're probably covered with the fact that we're setting the fees and charges for this alongside all the others at annual council. Is that correct?
That's correct. Each February it will come to February Council.
Okay, so we've got a safety net there. So I'm happy to propose the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. Might be slightly outside the remit of this particular discussion, but if members could quickly look at paragraph 5, I would just like to express my disappointment that one of the flats at Gleaner House has actually been subject to a right to buy, whereas it was absolutely clear at the outset when housing budget money was used that they would not be subject to right to buy. So I understand it's probably an administrative anomaly, but I would just like to express my disappointment that one of those flats has actually gone from social rent. Thank you.
Just for
would you like to
clarification,
come back on that, Nicola?
this report relates to the commercial leases on the ground floor of Gleaner, not the residential.
Oh, fair enough, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Just an observation, really. I agree this is probably a very good, timely review. It's the best practice to review as stated. I would do observe that with the optional 42-year
Yeah, so the only time we can introduce new leases is at the end of an existing lease, or with the agreement of the tenant, or at the start of a new lease for a new tenant. So there are points in time when we can do this. Otherwise, we're obliged to honour the existing leases that are in place. So for a lot of places on Porthmelon Industrial Estate, those leases will run till 2030 before we can review them. But it's important to have a methodology agreed at least, and then people know what's coming as we move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Previously, I had representations from some of the tenants on the industrial estate who were concerned about a massive hike in prices. Can I just clarify that that's all been resolved now? I'm sure it has, but it's just while we're on this topic.
So this report is sort of feedback on that, because I think what happens is in the existing leases that a lot of people have got is a 5-year rent review. And what we're suggesting here is, instead of waiting for 5 years and having that massive hike, is that it's done annually. So it seems it's easier to cater for and budget for, so it gives more certainty in budget planning.
Thank you. So I have a proposer for the adoption, please, of the proposed updates. Sorry, I can't see you there. Sorry, Councillor White.
Sorry, just to add, again, I think this is really sensible changes. You're streamlining and simplifying things. And given some of the issues we had around previous rent hikes during COVID, you know, those circumstances are very unlikely to occur again, but this goes a long way to ensuring that they don't. So yeah, I definitely approve of this.
Thank you very much. I have a proposer for the adoption of this recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please, Councillor Blackwell? All those in favour? That's carried, unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you very much indeed, Nicola, for your paper. Item 14 on the agenda is the draft Isles of Scilly National Landscape Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Management Plan 26 to 30 in the hands of Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. Good morning, members. So this report seeks members' approval for the draft Isles of Scilly National Landscape Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Management Plan, which can be found in Appendix A of the report, for formal public consultation for a period of 8 weeks, a process which will be led by the Isles of Scilly National Landscape Partnership. Since members' endorsement in July last year, the Isles of Scilly National Landscape Partnership has undertaken work to review and redraft the current management plan, including public drop-in sessions, online questionnaires, and stakeholder workshops. And more information can be found in the annexes of the draft plan. Recommendation 4 of this report is for members to give delegated authority to the Strategic Director for Place, Economy and Environment to approve the final version of the management plan in consultation with the lead member, to include making minor amendments after taking into consideration feedback from the formal public consultation. I'll take the rest of the report as read, but welcome any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, so a couple of points I'd like to bring out. First of all, there was a significant stakeholder group of interested bodies via the National Landscape, so it's been quite well looked at by them. It's only, it's just literally just a consultation document, so this is not what's going to happen. This is the opening part of the consultation, which we have to do. And also, I'd like to highlight there is no financial cost to the council for this consultation to be carried out. So with that in mind, I would like to propose the recommendations as in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Peacock has said, the contents of this report have been discussed widely in several forums, so for some members there has been some overlap. But I think this just shows how significant this piece of work is, which is, as members will have noticed, extremely detailed, and I'm happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous, it's carried. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much, Rebecca, for your paper. Item 15 on our agenda is the Town Hall operating governance model, in the hands of our Strategic Director, Nicola, again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We're probably all fed up about talking about Town Hall, aren't we? And I can't wait for that project to be finished. But to get us there, we need to look at the governance model again. So when we looked at the original governance for the operation of the facility once it's built, we took legal advice from Stone King back in September 23, and Council agreed that we would take our, their advice, which was to set up a charitable incorporated organisation. And following that advice, we then moved on to establishing something called the Scilly Arts and Heritage, who've done some significant development work over the last 18 months. Unfortunately, in June of this year, all 5 of the existing trustees for Scilly Arts and Heritage wanted to withdraw their trustee status, and that put us in a position to consider what our options are moving forward. As a result of that situation, the issue was urgent, so I called a meeting of the Arts Council and National Lottery and ourselves as funders, including the Chief Executive, to discuss the next steps and what our options might be, because from crisis sometimes comes opportunity as well. So we wanted to review what the current position was, but also options available, and that ought to be done independently. And all funders agreed that it would make sense for that to be done urgently, and DCA, who are David Clark Associates, who have already been working on the project and did some initial work in that governance period, were commissioned to look at the options and propose a way forward alongside some support that was provided by National Lottery to assure it was independent. And that report is set out Appendix A. So that review considered the operational readiness in terms of where we are right now. And I think, having looked at where Scilly Arts and Heritage were able to progress the project to, there was an element of anxiety, I think, about pushing for an early opening. So once the building's complete, there's quite a lot still to do before you open the facility. And rather than rush into that, the suggestion from the funders alongside ourselves at the time in those discussions was that probably it's better to aim for an autumn next year opening for the local community first, before going all bells and whistles for the visitors, because the danger is if the building's complete in early summer next year, you open at the height of the season, and if we're not operationally ready or fully operationally ready, that could result in a number of challenges in terms of the operation of the facility and the experience that the visitor and paying customer might have. So the suggestion is that we go for an autumn 26 opening to the local community first, because it is by and large their facility. So how do we get there? So a range of options have been considered, and they are set out in the report. And having looked at the organisations available to run the facility, the assets they have, the expertise they have, the funders are suggesting that the Isles of Scilly Museum Association be asked that they operate the facility, but they will need significant support as we move towards that as an operating model. And on the 11th of September, the Museum Association trustees met to consider the same options as we're considering here, and also agreed in principle to explore that as an option, but with the proviso that there's a significant amount of work to do and a greater understanding of what that business case might look like, because we need to all make sure that this will be a success and not a white elephant moving forward. So much work's now required, and an action plan has been developed by advisors and consultants alongside the funding bodies. And so the task list is immense. It will require a significant amount of work and some funding, which Arts Council have already looked at what additional funds they might be able to bring to the table in terms of this transition and governance work to help support the Museum Association and the project to move to a successful operating model. So the recommendations are before you on page 1 of the supplementary pack. And basically that's to approve the proposed operating model based on the development of the Museum Association, and to acknowledge the transition period that will need to take place. So there is a significant amount of work to take place, and depending on how that rolls through, we'll need to change trustees, etc. So we will work through those options together as a task and finish group with our funders in more of a partnership, I would say, as we move forward. So we need to work more closely with all those parties and use that expertise to make sure that this is a success. But as I say, from crisis comes opportunity, and I'm optimistic that if we can make this happen, that we'll have a very successful facility opening to the public in the autumn next year. And I think that's the concluding paragraph of the consultant's report, that this is an exciting project, and we have to remember where we've got to. So things go wrong in projects, and these create challenges and opportunities. I think we have to respond positively to that. So the recommendation is there for you. 2 recommendations set on page 1 of that agenda support pack. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, obviously it's disappointing that Scilly Arts and Heritage didn't become what we hoped it would become, but I think it's important to thank them for the work that they have done in the 18 months or so it is that they've been in existence. It's frustrating that when we talked about the governance model originally, one of the options was to develop the Isles of Scilly Museum Association into the operating body. But having taken the legal advice, as Nicola said, we opted for the new organisation. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time, but anyway, we are where we are now. And in a way, I think it's quite good that we've ended up here, because it becomes more of a local community kind of operation. Scilly Arts and Heritage was the trustees weren't really locals. 1 or 2 had good connections to the islands, but Isles of Scilly Museum Association obviously is part of Scilly, and it's important that this facility is part of the community. That's the whole point of it. It's the whole point of its existence. That's the whole point of the whole project, was to make this a hub for the residents. So anyway, I'm waffling on. So yes, it's disappointing that how we've got here, but I think where we are now is positive, and it's exciting, and I'm very optimistic that we can still get there, as are the Arts Council, as are National Lottery, Heritage Fund, who are the big funders in this. So yeah, deep breath, move on, and we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dean. Councillor Sims, please.
I have to say I'm neither optimistic or excited. I think I'm resigned. I think we've got no choice but to put this through, and I'm happy to recommend to make a proposed recommendation or second it. I'm just how do I do this without being rude? I don't think I can. I don't actually think that the Museum Association has got the skill set necessarily to run the events, or sorry, the whole part of it. Yeah, they can run a museum, but I'm not altogether sure that they can. There's event management. There's quite a lot of things to do there. And I just wondered, I think the obvious body to actually to run that part of the building would be on partnership, and I don't know if they've been asked or anything, but they've got they do this quite a lot. I'm happy, like I said, to propose the recommendation, but I'm certainly not happy because I don't necessarily think that the Museum Association has the skills to run the community hall part of this project.
Thank you very much. Nicola, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the Museum Association are very self-aware of where their strengths are, and are very aware of the support that's needed and the skill sets required. So there will be a need for further trustee recruitment, and also working more in partnership, which is what I hinted at earlier. And so certainly the skills of Visit Scilly in terms of marketing and branding would be welcomed. We've also got expressions of interests that have been made in relation to the running of the cafe, and also to the theatre facility, the technical facility. And that's when I reference the use of partnership. I think the success of the facility will depend on actually mobilising everybody together, working together, but with the Museum Association in their new form and with their new skills and with the support we need to give them, the ability to head that. Somebody's got to head it and be the accountable body as we move into operational mode, but they're very self-aware about what other support and strengths they're going to need to do that. And I think on Island, on this, within this community, those skills that exist, and it's about showing leadership through myself and the council in enabling that to happen. So I don't think anybody's saying, and the Museum Association themselves are very nervous about the significant obligation this will place on their shoulders and the significant amount of growth and support they're going to need in getting to a point where we've got a successful facility. But we have got staff now employed who have got some of those skills, and we have got funders who are willing to come and support that process and build that capacity and capability on Island.
Thank you. Leah?
My interjection, Chair, is just one for being a stickler for procedure, and just to say that if Councillor Rogers is declaring an interest on this item, that he'd need to remove himself from the chamber before the vote, because we updated our standing orders in May.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Grottick, you were next, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to support the comments made about the business acumen needed in the new transitional trustees as we look to not only complete this exciting project, but also think about the revenue budget going forward. So that's really, really important. I also agree, as our officer and director has just said, that we should all be trying to support this as much as possible and actually try and put out some good news communication, because we do know that the cost of this project is of significant community concern. And I have to say, I do share some of those concerns, but I just hope that when it's up and finished and running, everybody will think it's worth every penny. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
I was going to make the point that Councillor Grottick, I think, has just made. I think it's a timely opportunity now to do a public statement around the building, which is changing on a week-by-week basis, on the budget, which has obviously had a lot of debate in social media, and the governance, which we're discussing today. It's an opportunity to rectify some myths and just put some good news out there about what the position of the project is.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on 14, financial implications, just nice to see that bit there. The council will not be putting any additional funds into the project. I just think for the public record, that should be said.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Roger, please.
Just checking I'm okay to speak.
As long as the chair permits, yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did, obviously, Visit Scilly's come up on more than one occasion in this discussion, and I just wanted to add to Nicola and a point about partnership in order to deliver this project. Visit Scilly's board meeting last week discussed this at length, and we are fully committed to being a partner in this where we are required and needed. We've mentioned it being a hub for residents, but I think the business plan will eventually bear out that without the visitor economy, this facility simply will not stack up financially. So it's vital that we connect with the visitor economy, and therefore it's vital that Visit Scilly plays its role. And I have been instructed by the board of Visit Scilly to take part in that journey to see where we get to, and we are fully committed to doing that. I already have a meeting in place on Friday with the chair of the trustees, Catherine, and we will move it forward from there. But just to say formally in this meeting that we look forward to playing our part where we can, and we'll see where we get to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think, as Councillor Grottick said, I think it's worth acknowledging there's some scepticism in the public about the project, and bringing that up in this meeting. I just wanted to ask about the new organisation. Previously, when we chose to go with the way we did, there were certain financial reasons and VAT reasons for doing that. Are we covered in the same way with this arrangement?
Yeah, so I think David Clark Associates picks that up in terms of there's some work to do around tax, VAT, etc. So as we work through this process, we need to make sure the organisation that's formed to run it which will be an evolution of the Museum Association, has the right tax exemptions in place. So absolutely need that expertise. So when we talked about the need for other consultancy work, critical to that is the VAT tax exemption for this facility moving forward.
Okay, and that brings me to another question. So, like Councillor Guy says, it's good to see that there's a commitment there not to put any more council money into the project. What I'm concerned about is officer time. So obviously this is going to be a huge increase in, it seems to me like a huge increase in workload. Is that going to be manageable? Are we going to be able to manage different workloads within that as well? So I don't want other things to suffer because of this. Obviously you want this project to succeed. We need it to succeed because it's large, to say the least. But is it realistic as well?
Yeah, so I think we've got an intensive period of work over the next 6 weeks. So I might look a bit tired at the next council meeting. So we've got an existing project team that's paid for through the funds already. So what I'm trying to use is my time, but also our existing project team's time. So we've got various consultants that work for us as a council, but they have expertise that will be able to support us moving through. So the idea is we run a bit of a task and finish group over the next 6 weeks to work really hard and fast at getting the basics in place to move us forward and commission people that we need, using funding from Arts Council, hopefully, and the National Lottery to provide the expertise alongside that. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but it's about time management and prioritisation. And I think if me and my team can put the time in now over the next 6 weeks, it will solve a lot of time and energy later on. So I think we expect some hard work to come over those coming weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
2 points. The first, actually, I'll raise the first point first, to be for Leah. Ireland's partnership has now been raised in the Chamber. It wasn't necessarily in the report. I am obviously a director of Ireland's partnership. I would therefore assume that I do the same now as.
But it's a matter for each individual member if they're declaring an interest. My view is that the decision that you're being asked to make today is one step removed from that, because this is just about that governance structure moving forwards. It doesn't get into any further detail regarding the ongoing works, the partnerships, etc.
I was just trying to be squeaky clean. Thank you, Leah. So bearing that in mind, I will continue. So a couple of questions from me. There's been significant overruns in the project, and I know some of our funders are a little bit frustrated, might be the right word. Can I just clarify that all funders are happy? I think you said in your report before that all funders are happy with the current arrangements, and make sure that's in place. So we don't want anybody coming back and saying, "Oh, you're going to have a reduction because we have, you're no longer using the same proposal governance as we did." And also, just to check within the council who's managing the consultants at the current time, who's performance managing the consultants.
So in terms of whether funders are on board, as I've said in the paper, this is a joint proposition. We've already got the funders on board. It's the funders' proposals that we do it in this way. So I'm the first to say when things need a bit of help from outside expertise, I'll put my hand up and I'll go to the funders and say, can you help us? What expertise you've got? They've been through projects like this day in, day out. This is a unique experience for us as a council, but they've got that expertise. So the first thing we do is make sure the funders are on board and seek their advice, which is absolutely what's happening. What was the second part of the question? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so they are on board with it and we are working together and we meet regularly. We do funders reports and monitoring meetings every month, and we also meet regularly, fortnightly, in terms of the task of getting this particular piece of work over the line as well.
Perfect, thank you. I can just see a scenario where some of our funders might be a little bit jumpy at this point, and it gives me a bit to say everything is hunky-dory, which is good.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please don't consider this next comment negative in any way, shape or form, but are we carefully performance managing the consultants?
Well, there's been no cause for complaint so far. The consultants have been working very hard and very supportive. And you see this work was done in a month. and that's really impressive. So I think from my point of view, in terms of performance, the consultants are doing well. I think the other point it actually was what John made. It's come back to me now around the progress on the site and Stepnell's work on site. And I think everyone's frustrated about the length of time building projects take. And I've had the same conversation myself. Are we doing something wrong? Why is this project taking so long? And I've sought assurance from others, including Ken Jones up at the hospital site, around, in terms of performance management on site, what is it that we need to do differently to ensure we get this project delivered at the right time? And he's looked at what we're doing, he's looked at our setup, it's looked at our contracts, but it's a very typical construction project in that it's protected by contracts on both sides. We have to go through the requirements within those contracts. And it was interesting to listen to him about the hospital project and say he's worked in construction for 30 years and that's the most difficult project he's ever delivered. How on earth you're managing the project on the town hall, Nicola, I do not know. So I think that was reassurance for me, is that despite my inexperience at delivering £20 million projects, others who have delivered projects of this nature think we're in the right place. This is what would be normal. This is that construction sector's norm, whether we like it or not, and it's as frustrating for me as it is for anybody else. This is norm, and it's set out in contract. And we have to go with that contract. We have to perform according to that contract and use the rules that are set out within it. So, yeah, whether I agree with those contracts and the construction industry and the way it's set up or not is a different matter. But we are where we are, and I think keep looking at ourselves and saying, are we managing it in the right way? Is there anything else we need to do? What other challenge and assurance do we need to have? And other funders are on our backs, making sure we're doing that as well. But it seems entirely normal from what I've heard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all that. Before I take the vote, I would just, okay, sorry, Councillor Sims's head is blocking out the light, but I was just going to say, Councillor White, before I bring you in, just from the chair, that my view of this is that not only do we need the buy-in of the financial partners and other partners that we've heard about today and others again, we need as many partners as we can get in this project, but we also need substantial, if that's the right word, trustees added to the board that have very significant business expertise, cultural expertise. We need to bring in some big hitters who are really going to make this project work, because it would be disastrous for this council and this community if it fails. So I think from my point of view, and I know Nicola's as well, and others, Tim, it's a search now to find some really good trustees to build this up and actually run this extremely well, and I'm sure we can do that. So I just wanted to mention that to you. Thank you. Councillor White, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that sort of in my role sitting on the project board, I've been working with the director of the Museum and Cultural Centre over the summer, helping draw up a short list of ticketing and CRM systems for them to look at in the future, because that's my background. And as part of that, I've had quite a few conversations with Lydia Bassett, the director. And I have to say that the plans for the programme, when this is up and running, are exciting, with the community embedded within them. And I think it's essential to get this project over the line, because it will bring benefits for the local community, the economy, and the visitor economy as well. And in terms of the extra funds needed, this may or may not reassure members, but I know from my background working in the arts and cultural sector that every arts organisation is fundraising all the time. They are all fundraising all the time. But that is something the director has experience of, and I'm confident they'll be able to find the funds needed. And then when it's up and running, that will be their responsibility and not ours. So I sort of endorse the report, and I think moving to the Museum Association is probably the most sensible option at this point. And it's a shame that things haven't worked out as originally envisaged, but yeah, I'm confident we can get this over the line and make a good job of it.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, I had a proposer in Councillor Sims. Councillor Dean, are you seconding? Thank you. All those in favour of the recommendations? That's carried, unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you, Nicola, for your paper. We move on now to item 16 on our agenda, which is the Green Maritime Corridor Feasibility Study, which is in the hands of our Chief Executive. Thank you. So.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. At the last full council in July, the Chairman made an announcement that a company called Artemis Technologies were leading a feasibility study to look at the use of 100% electric, zero-emission passenger ferry transport to Scilly from Cornwall. And this report just brings back slightly more details for you about that project. As said in the Chairman's announcement and in this report, this is a project that's led by Artemis Technologies. They have bid into a government programme for clean maritime demonstration projects. They have been successful in that bid, and they are looking at doing a feasibility study on whether their groundbreaking technology in hydrofoil vessels could actually provide a ferry or transport links between Scilly and the mainland, which would be zero emissions, which meets our council objective of looking for a low carbon economy and a low carbon lifestyle on the islands. The council's involvement in this is that we were asked whether we would like to provide some assistance to Artemis if they were successful on this project, particularly at the Scilly end of the project. We said yes, we're quite happy to work with any operator who comes along with any innovative ideas to improve or help with our transport connectivity, but we wouldn't be doing that from our own funds. Therefore, if they wanted us to do any help or assistance at this end, they would have to provide the funding as part of the project, which is what they have done. So it would be at zero cost to the council. Any work that we do and the type of work we may be involved in is helping them do research on the Isles of Scilly, if they need to carry out some survey work, if they just need us to help put on events, etc. And as I said, we will get any cost that we incur in that, and including our staff time from Nigel and the team will be recovered in full from this project. Open to questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sims, please.
Yeah, I would endorse everything that the Chief Executive just said. There is I've known about this for quite a long time, because we had a non-disclosure agreement on it, and when I first saw the news item on it, it said that the council were a partner. Now, I was slightly bemused on that basis because I didn't think we were a partner, but I sought clarification, and we are sort of, but we're a partner on the basis that we we have input and we can claim anything back that it costs us. So it's quite an interesting form of partnership. We have no commitment to it whatsoever, and so I think from the council's perspective, it's win-win, and I think that potentially this is if the feasibility study does demonstrate that they can do this, it's an absolute game changer for the islands, and it would be brilliant. So, and would change the I should say landscape moving forward. It's the wrong word. It's not land, is it? But anyway, you know what I mean. So I'm very, very happy to propose this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, obviously, as lead member for the environment, anything that any operator can do to help us get towards our net zero is to be applauded, and I look forward to seeing and discussing this bit with Artemis when they're on island, hopefully. I think there's some dates in the calendar. But I just want to clarify one item, that Artemis came to us and we didn't go to Artemis. In other words, this was very much a company wants to do a feasibility study about their own systems. They looked for partners and they found I forget the name of the other company, the other shipping company to work with. And they then thought, what route can we find that's the roughest route? And they came across our route. And at that point, they then said that we need the Isles of Scilly on board to give us advice, which is what the council has done. So it's very much for me because I've had a few concerned members of the public speak to me, and is this the council trying to, undermine things? Not at all. It's just, from my view, I think Steve has said it, and as has Russell, that it's very much people coming to us for input. And if you just perhaps clarify, that'd be great.
And just to confirm what you said, John, Artemis approached us, we didn't approach them. And it came out of the blue, really. We weren't really expecting it or anything. And from our perspective, it was a sort of win-win, as you said, because it's looking at our transport infrastructure, which we know is always an issue for us, but it also comes with that proposal to provide a very clean transport network if it was successful. And let's face it, this is what we would like to see anyway in terms of the approach from any operator, which is do your work first, do a feasibility study, see if it works. Not jump in and say, we're going to do this, and then find out afterwards that you can't deliver it. So that, I think their approach is exactly how we would like to see it done, but they approached us, not us approaching them.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just think that it's important to note that the Council has a responsibility to support all attempts to improve connectivity and thus the economic and social viability of island life. It's a clear responsibility of our Council on behalf of our community. And I would just ask on a more practical level of the Chief Executive and 151 Officer about, have we thought yet about funding for the harbour infrastructure that will be needful at Newlyn if that place is used, please?
I think it's part of the feasibility study. We'll work out what is required in terms of investment either into private or public infrastructure to support it, and that's all be part of whether it's a feasible option at the end.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. I just want to sort of think about the financial implications, paragraph 15. It says the last sentence is unlikely event that council's costs are forecast to exceed the limit of the budget in the project. I'd just like to tighten that up, say the council costs will not exceed the project budget. So there will be no need for a paper because they'll be all contained within that. So can I make a proposed change to the recommendation to say those words, basically, that the costs won't exceed that budget? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm happy if you want to do that, Councillor. I mean, the way it was written was that the cost would not be exceeded without coming back to full council to get permission, which would be unlikely that we would get that permission.
Let's be clear about it, that they're not going. So, Chairman, I'll propose an amendment to the recommendation to say that all costs will be contained within the project budget of 70,000.
Okay. I'll take that in a moment. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Nixon, please.
Yeah, thank you. On a similar point, actually, I just wanted to clarify when the £70,000 budget was set, what was anticipated to cover, and are we sure that will cover enough?
Yeah, we're comfortable that it covers all costs, etc. We had to provide a detailed analysis of what those costs would be to Innovate UK as part of their due diligence after they had awarded the contract. The majority of the costs will be in and around doing survey work, etc., and was based on the survey work we did in previous projects where we know exactly how much it cost us. So we are very confident that the figure in there is a very comfortable figure.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, do we know why Newlyn is the port of choice they use, or is that a question for them?
I think that would be a question from them, but if you can remember lessons learned from previous initiatives that operators looked at, is that Penzance is very limited with its existing infrastructure. The fact that an existing operator has the majority use of the main quay, the rest of the facilities at Penzance are then very tidal, meaning that you can only operate at certain key times of the day, or even certain key times of the month you can't even operate. So it hasn't got the facility to support an alternative operator. So I think that's why they're looking at Newlyn, and Newlyn is less tidal and does have capacity.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll take the amendment first to the recommendation from Councillor Marcus.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but can I come in on the amendment
Yes, of
just
course.
to clarify something with Councillor Marcus? So you're not prohibiting yourself or curtailing the way the council can behave in future. My suggested wording would be that you have a new recommendation too, with something along the lines of council costs associated with this study will not exceed the budget of £70,000 without further approval of full council, because if you just leave it at will not, you don't know what might happen in the future. There might be an associated £2,000 additional cost, but with benefits that override that cost. So I think it's important that you give yourself the opportunity to approve further costs if it benefits the council.
Okay.
Thank you. So you're happy with that wording, Councillor
Correct.
Marcus?
Yep.
Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Sims. All those in favour of the amendment? That's unanimous, carried. Thank you very much indeed. So we go back now to the proposer for this for these recommendations. Is that you, Councillor Sims? Yes. And do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Nixon. All those in favour? It's unanimous, carried again. Thank you very much indeed. So we move on now to item 17 on our agenda, which is the employee travel and accommodation expenses, which is the report of the interim head of HR, Natalie, and I'm just going to do an introduction to that. Over the past 10 to 15 years, local government has become increasingly regulated, adding to the requirement for specialist knowledge and skills in managing our services. The council also faces significant recruitment and retention challenges due to its geographic isolation and limited housing availability, which make it difficult to attract skilled staff into senior, specialist and hard-to-fill roles. Unlike mainland councils that can draw from a broader talent pool across the UK with minimal travel costs, the Isles of Scilly's high cost of living, travel and accommodation act as major deterrents for potential recruits. The council's current policy is that mainland-based staff must self-fund any business travel to the islands, and off-island-based staff must also self-fund any travel to St Mary's for work. This personal cost of business travel further exacerbates the recruitment and retention issues. In response, the council has adopted various workarounds where the skills we need are not available on the islands to enable us to recruit and retain these staff, such as grossing up salaries to cover travel costs, adding significant tax and national insurance costs, paying agency fees as well as full travel expenses for interim or agency staff. These measures, while necessary, have led to further financial strain. A review of the relevant policies is therefore brought to us today by HR to enable us to remedy these issues. I will now hand over to Natalie Swift, interim head of HR, who will talk through some of the more of the detail and be available for any questions. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Chair, for that helpful introduction, and good morning, everyone. So the paper that I'm introducing today proposes changes that would impact upon two council policies, and you have those in your packs there. So firstly, the new recruitment, selection and promotions policy. If adopted, this would replace the existing recruitment and selection policy that's dated May 2018. And the proposal is that the updated policy would be adopted from the 1st of October this year. So that new proposed policy has a number of updates to it. That includes the addition of a procedure for the recruitment of agency and interim workers and external consultants. Additional detail on good practice recruitment processes, including safer recruitment. We've got those revised travel and accommodation provisions for employees who are recruited into the council. And Appendix D in your pack details the breakdown of the costings for the proposed changes there. The second policy that would be impacted is the pay policy statement. Again, that's in your packs and dated March of this year. The changes to this policy are limited just to the amendments on the sections around employee travel and expenses, and again proposed to come into effect on the 1st of October. These changes would apply to all employees of the council throughout their employment, and the changes basically mirror the ones that are proposed in that recruitment policy. So in order for these proposed changes to apply equally to all employees, Council is also invited today to consider superseding an October 2023 full Council decision, which created a different expense arrangement for the Chief Executive Officer, such that the CEO would then, from the 1st of October, also be covered by the new policy alongside all other employees. In your packs, you've also got there an equality impact assessment, which has been conducted for these proposed policy updates. So the key changes that are proposed, and I'm not going to read through the whole report, I'll just sort of work through those key changes and the reasons that they're proposed. So at the moment, the council has a blanket policy, and that's in the existing pay policy statement, that all employees are required to work at council premises. However, in recent years, we've got digital technology, which now enables employees to carry out some kinds of work remotely. And in line with many other local authorities, some employees now work either remotely or on a hybrid basis on the islands or on the mainland. So the policy updates basically are to recognise that these flexible working arrangements may exist at the council if that's suitable for a particular individual job role. Now, in terms of which roles that might apply to, the council's got just under 200 employees, and at last count, approximately 20 positions that could be performed potentially remotely or hybrid to an appropriate standard of performance. So we're talking about roughly 1 in 10 of our positions in the council, because the vast majority of our employees are frontline delivering services in the community and would not be able to perform those duties remotely. So of those 20-ish positions, at the moment, we've got roughly around about 10 to 12 of those occupied by people who are currently working remotely or in a hybrid fashion. And if you look at your Appendix D, you'll be able to see the breakdown of which roles I am talking about there. So the proposed changes today, as it stands, would affect roughly about a dozen employees. Okay, so we're not talking about an impact on most employees in the council. There's some relevant legislation here that I wanted to mention. So flexible working regulations allow employees to request flexible working, which can include remote working. Also the Equality Act 2010, which gives a duty for us to make reasonable adjustments for a disability. Again, that might include a request for remote working. So if we were to deny a flexible working request as a council or request for a reasonable adjustment on the basis of a blanket policy such as this one, that carries the risk of infringing employees' statutory rights under those pieces of legislation. In terms of flexible working requests as well, just to kind of address that point really, where we may have an employee that's currently perhaps based on the islands and wants to request to work remotely and to work from a different workplace for that reason. We have a flexible working policy, and we need to follow the law in this area, which would be considering each request on its merits. And as outlined in the policy, there are 8 statutory reasons why the council could refuse a request for flexible working, for example, remote working, and those include cost, operational feasibility, etc. So, we retain that ability as a council to make decisions about people's workplace where they're requesting to work in a different location. So the proposed change here is to update the policy to reflect the potential for employees to work remotely or hybrid in those roles which can be performed to a satisfactory standard that way, using modern technology and ensuring that people's statutory rights for flexible work requests and reasonable adjustments are protected. Okay, the second area that I wanted to talk through in terms of the impact this policy would have is at the moment the council also has a blanket policy. Again, that's in your pay policy statement there, that employees who live on the off islands must self-fund any travel to St Mary's for work. So, for example, if we had a senior or administrative employee who usually works remotely from home on St Martin's or Tresco, but they need to attend St Mary's for meetings from time to time, current policy requires that the employee themselves must personally bear the cost of that travel. So this creates some difficulty in recruiting and retaining off-island employees due to that personal expense of travel to St Mary's. And the reason that happens currently is because the deemed place of work for them is any council premises, which means that travelling from the off-islands to St Mary's would be commuting as it stands to their permanent workplace. So I think it's helpful here to draw a distinction between commuting and business travel. So commuting is travel from home to a permanent workplace, which is, what we would pay for ourselves as employees. Business travel is where you have a permanent workplace and you're travelling somewhere else for a temporary purpose. That will be business travel, and it's business travel expenses that we're talking about today, rather than commuting. So the proposed change here would be to update the policy so that off-island employees whose permanent workplace is actually remote, working from home, would have their genuine business travel expenses to St Mary's funded by the council, with the caveat that those need to be approved in advance by a manager, be necessary for performance of their duties, be cost efficient, and to a temporary workplace, as I say. And we would propose to put in place a central council booking system to ensure we've got the best price. And all of that is about maintaining cost control, really, of these measures. Third area I wanted to talk through was that the council currently has a blanket policy, again in that pay policy statement, that employees who live on the mainland must self-fund any travel to the Isles of Scilly for work. So I want to start by saying, first of all, that the council supports the local economy and we promote all of our vacancies to people already living on the islands. So we welcome applications for people on the islands for every vacancy that we have. We also have a relocation policy which sets out support there for people to move from the mainland to the islands to live on island and work on island. Housing shortages on the islands do present some challenge with that. And so this policy really is only applicable to those roles that can be carried out remotely. As I mentioned, that's about 1 in 10 of our positions, and where people are maybe unable to move to the islands or for other reasons living on the mainland or off island. So as the chair rightly pointed out before the item today, the council has a responsibility to provide good quality services to the islands and must meet the standards set out in a variety of regulatory and inspectorate bodies. So we have CQC, Ofsted, HMI for constabulary and fire and rescue services, etc. So we have that requirement to maintain that compliance with various pieces of legislation and provide those statutory services. This introduces an increasing degree of complexity to the management of public services and the need for that specialist knowledge, specialist skills in a variety of areas. The islands have a population of just over 2,000 people. And on many occasions we can recruit from within the islands population to find those skills. However, we also need to be able to recruit from outside the islands where the best candidate for the job resides elsewhere and where that job could be performed partly or wholly remotely. So the current policy means that mainland-based candidates applying for jobs would need to pay for their own business travel to the islands, for meetings, for events, for other work. And the cost of a single trip vary, depending obviously on what transport is chosen, boat, plane, helicopter, etc. But with accommodation costs added on, that's usually going to be hundreds of pounds per trip. So for those senior and specialist professionals that are based on the mainland, that would have other roles available to them to apply for, where they wouldn't have such personal expenditure on business travel, it makes it really difficult for us to compete in that market to be able to recruit those specialist and senior skills that we need. I also want to draw the council's attention to Green Book terms and conditions that indicates that local government employees incurring additional expense will have those travel expenses reimbursed. That's the National Collective Agreement for local government employees as well. So in the light of this, the proposed changes here today are to ensure that we recognise people's normal place of work. If that's remote, then we recognise that, and that business travel expenses are then funded for those. As I say, it's approximately a dozen employees at the moment, with those cost controls in place, so that any travel must be approved by a manager in advance, must be cost efficient, necessary for the performance of the role, booked via a council booking system, and would also propose that the first 25 miles of travel from that person's home address, if they're working from home, that they would pay for that themselves. And again, the travel must be for temporary purposes, not to a permanent workplace. Okay, the final area that I wanted to talk about was the issue of the shortage of housing on the islands and the challenges that presents for recruitment as well. So this paper also proposes that the council works with other stakeholders to seek to address this housing shortage issue. Okay, so the cost of the proposals is set out in Appendix D, which you have access to there. And I just want to extend my thanks to Tracy Stepney as a Deputy Section 151 officer who's here today to assist with any financial questions in a moment, who's provided those indicative costings for this report. The net cost of the proposals is offset by removing some of those more tax inefficient workarounds that we currently have, and savings are also anticipated because if we're able to recruit permanently, it means that we can then replace agency and interim staff to a substantial saving. So I'm anticipating that you would wish for this policy and the related costs to be brought to scrutiny, perhaps on a regular basis. So, for example, a report could be presented to scrutiny for the first 12 months or so of the policy, or whatever scrutiny arrangements members would prefer to keep track on the costs of this particular policy. So the proposals today, as I say, are to protect the council's ability to recruit and retain the skilled and specialist employees that we need, end the series of tax inefficient and workarounds that we've currently got in place, and make sure they've got a transparent, fair and consistent and legally compliant policy for business travel. There are 4 recommendations in front of you to achieve this. I'm happy to take any questions that you have before council considers your decision on these points, and I have Tracy as well for any of the financial questions as well. So happy to hand back to you, Chair, at this stage for any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Natalie. Chief Executive, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to make a couple of brief comments as head of paid service on this, and then I will leave the meeting because there's a recommendation there specific to my post, and obviously it wouldn't be right that I stayed in the room for the debate and the vote. Much of what I was going to say, what I was thinking of saying, has already just been said by both the Chair and Natalie, but along the lines that in a modern local authority, the skill sets and the qualifications that are now required for us to live in this regulatory world that we find ourselves in, unfortunately, that sort of tool set of skills and qualifications don't sit with people on the islands in all instances. Therefore, we need to actually cast our net a little bit further, as has been said, to get those skills and those people on our payroll to ensure that we can deliver those statutory services to the levels that the regulators now require. Now, there are 2 ways, in my view, as head of paid service, how we can deliver that. There is one that we can employ staff ourselves as the Council of the Isles of Scilly. The other one is that we can adopt what other councils do somewhere else in the country, which is have a very large commissioning approach and commission a lot of these services in from third parties outside of the council. My preferred option as head of paid service is always, and particularly with Scilly, is to employ these key roles directly as employees of the council. I think that gives a far better buy-in to the council, to the islands, to what we need. But we could commission either through external private organisations, through other local authorities, through a range of agency and interim organisations. But it comes back down to those will all cost probably more, and for any visiting officers from those organisations, the costs would be recoverable from the council, so we'd be paying for the costs of those visits, and those costs of those visits would probably be higher because they would be entitled to a higher level of reimbursement in terms of when they are here. So my preferred option as head of paid services is to employ people directly. That, I think, what I wouldn't really want is a senior leadership team where the majority of people were not direct employees of the council. If there were people that were either working for Cornwall Council or working for a private sector organisation that provides outsourced services to councils, that's not a model that I would be very comfortable with as your chief executive. So therefore, I think we have to accept that we will need to cast our net wider. That means tapping into the labour markets that are on the mainland in some circumstances, not the majority by any means. It's more for the specialist skill sets that we need and the qualifications, and often the qualifications are a statutory requirement of the role in the world that we live in now. And to do that, we have to be competitive. Our salaries are already slightly off being competitive with the mainland. Being a small organisation, we're probably slightly under the benchmark for salaries in this area, requiring people then to pay for their travel to and from the islands is just putting yourself in a position where we're not really offering something in the marketplace that will attract the right people. Cost of recruitment is very expensive. You know, I've just seen quotes for doing something very recently. You know, we could easily incur £20,000 of recruitment expenses to no avail if we haven't got the right package. And then if we don't recruit, what do? We go again with another 20,000 of recruitment expenses, you know, or we go back and say, let's go and approach somebody else and see whether they can provide the services we want. As I said, that's not my preferred option. My preferred option is, I think, this council needs to employ these people. They get better buy-in, they get a better understanding of what is needed for this community, and buying in consultants would not deliver that. I think I'll just leave it there, and I will need to leave because of the recommendation that's on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you. Shall we just wait a moment for the Chief Executive to leave, Chair, and then I'd be happy, if I may, to have a few minutes to state my views. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no doubt that this paper has generated some challenging comment on social media, and I'm grateful for a few minutes to share my views. Firstly, I would say that some of the comments, while no doubt heartfelt, are based on several misunderstandings. As colleagues and most islanders recognise, we are the smallest unitary authority in the United Kingdom, with the widest remit of responsibilities, including an airport and a residential care home. The size of our population is irrelevant in many respects. We must comply, as the Chief Executive has just pointed out, with all the statutory obligations of larger authorities. It just means that our officers have fewer members of staff to support them, and that many wear at least 2 hats. Our Chief Executive is also our S151 officer, which generates a saving of £30,000 to £50,000 a year. All our directors need to have a particular skill set to carry out their statutory responsibilities. They are paid according to negotiated pay settlements, and comparing their salaries to, for example, the Prime Minister's is not relevant. We must, again, as the Chief Executive has just said, the best candidate for all our staff family. This is especially important at director level, where the need for stability is essential. We are about to recruit to the permanent director posts in both children's services and adult services. As we are aware, we have needed to improve in both areas. This has been a challenge, but I am optimistic we are on the right path. We have an interim director who is committed, as was the previous incumbent, to the enhanced service structure that will deliver the stability we must have to remain an independent authority now and in the future. This independence was clearly supported in our corporate plan consultation with our residents. This will require the recruitment of a highly skilled candidate, and for that we need to offer a robust offer that goes beyond the beautiful island location that we are lucky enough to call home. We need to offer the necessary package of support, including travel and accommodation. So to finish, based on the information contained in the report and the appendices, I am minded to support the recommendations, and I would encourage other members to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grottick. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Point of order, respectfully. I understand some councillors have pecuniary interests in this item regarding staff accommodation, giving rise to a conflict of interest, and the expectation may be to step out of the room.
Can I just say that's being covered in the following paper?
Should I come back on that?
Yes,
Chair?
of course.
So, in respect of this item, I don't think there is a pecuniary interest. I also don't think that, well, there is a pecuniary interest, but there isn't one which prevents the chair from being part of the debate or voting, in my view, either in this item or the next item. So in respect of this item, I'm satisfied as monitoring officer that the registered pecuniary interest of the chairman does not prevent him from partaking in the debate or voting.
Thank you.
Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank Natalie for the thorough report, your thorough explanation just now, and obviously for the updated policies. I'm going to reiterate some of your points anyway, just to ensure they're minuted, because I know there is a lot of public interest in this. So I think it's very important to note, as Natalie's already said, that this isn't a policy about commuting. This is a policy about business travel. We're not putting in place anything that is unusual for all authorities. I'm not aware of any employer, except perhaps the armed forces, that can dictate where their staff live. So therefore, if you have a role that doesn't require you to be in a particular location every day, you have the option to live wherever you choose. We've long had a policy in place that says that we pay for travel to the mainland for our officers who live here. Therefore, when we have officers who live on the mainland, they should have the same rights. We should also be mindful that this policy does benefit those staff who live on and work on the off islands for their travel. This isn't a policy in place to suggest that we'll employ people who decide to live on the mainland, and when they fancy a jolly, they'll ring up the council and say, I want to come over to work for a week, so please pay for my holiday. They will only come over at points when business requires it, and it will be signed off by their managers. If we don't want to have people working from home, our only other policy is to ensure that every member of staff has a fixed office base on St Mary's. And obviously, if we were to go down that approach, we would lose staff. We already struggle to retain and recruit staff, so why on earth would we do anything that makes it harder? Natalie's offered to bring to scrutiny routine reports about the costs of implementing these policies. I would like to suggest as well that the benefits of the policy get brought to scrutiny as well. Obviously, by implementing this policy, we get rid of costly workarounds and unusual tax arrangements, which will net off some of the costs of implementing this policy. And again, as is made clear in the report and the appendices, we are still pushing to have staff based on Scilly. We are still having remuneration offered for relocation and packages in place to support staff to move to Scilly and live on Scilly. But we have to accept this will not always be possible, and in some cases not appropriate. We do have staff who we actually encourage to work on the mainland, such as the new member of staff who's supporting post-16 children on the mainland. It should also be iterated that this policy has been covered off by the trade unions. They've reviewed it, accepted it. It does meet the terms and conditions under the Green Book, and therefore we are complying with the law by implementing it. One thing I would like to suggest, along with the recommendations, is that when the policy goes into place, that all employees are notified to ensure they are aware themselves whether they themselves are classed as a hybrid worker, a remote worker, or office-based, to ensure there's no confusion going forward for staff. and I'd like to propose the recommendations other than that one as they stand.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. I think you've said some of the things I wanted to raise, but I just want to bring some points, really. My first point is I've had a number of people commenting to me in the street and whatever, as generally people do. I think we need a bit of realism here. You know, we are an authority in a major housing crisis. We know that. So if we take an average salary of 80,000, which is probably about right, other than the head of service is probably a little bit more than that, but maybe that's the kind of area. When I was away looking at mortgages, you can get 3.5 times your salary. So if you were an individual coming to these islands, the most that you could get for a mortgage is 280,000. I spent some time yesterday looking at the Sibley's, not to name a company, but Sibley's board outside the Atlantic. I could not find any suitable accommodation that I would want to move to if I was working in one of these senior roles for 280,000. So the reality is we have a housing issue. That means that we are never going to be able to recruit the people that we want on these islands. So therefore, until that housing is relieved, and there are a number of things going on that will help that, but still, until we get to that point, it's my belief that we're always going to have people on the mainland. I'm really interested to see that there's 20 positions been shown in Appendix D. I think there were concerns in the community that anybody that worked for the council could say, oh, I fancy living on the mainland now, and they'll pay my flight across. Plainly, that's not the scenario we're now in with the report. So I also note that Natalie's comment of 10 to 12 currently a hybrid. So for me, I think much as I would always want someone to work in this community and live in this community, for the reasons I've just stated, I don't think that's currently possible with our current housing stock. So therefore, again, I'm minded to support the recommendation. And very, very quickly, just to come on to off-island, for me, there is an untapped resource on the off-islands, so Tresco, Biow and St Agnes. I am aware of people coming to work here, but they're generally at a much lower salary level than they currently are. So I welcome the intervention in this policy for that. If an unfortunate person was on St Agnes, and I'm going to take 1 week of the year, which I think is important, which is the half-term week. If I had to work, if I was living on Tresco or St Martin's or St Agnes or Briar, and I had to come to work in the half-term week when there are no early years provision, when there is no school provision, that would cost me circa £600 a week. And I do not believe that anybody in their right mind on these islands, A, can afford that amount of money in the winter, but B, would have a look at it. And in fact, I remember having a conversation with one of my, some time ago now, someone who was actually working for the council at the time, who actually had to stop working for the council because it didn't stack. The amount of money they were going to have to pay to travel to St Mary's to carry out their role didn't stack for them, and unfortunately they then left the islands. The final thing I will say is, which is really, really good, is it's really great to see that some employees on the islands do whatever they can to be on island. I was talking to someone who came to stay on St Agnes maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe about a month ago. They were in a temporary holiday accommodation on St Agnes, and they were working on St Mary's. Not necessarily for the council, but in an associated role. I don't want to name the individual person because we're not in part 3. But I asked them, oh, where are you staying next week then? I said, oh, we've got to go to the campsite now for 6 weeks. So they have a valid job on the islands, but they're actually having to camp to actually maintain that role. And I doubt very, very few people working for the council would ever consider camping to keep their role going. And that's the scenario on these islands at the moment that we're in. Also.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peacock. Councillor Guy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As to Natalie, really, apologies for not attending the workshop previously. You stated 12, this will affect 12 employees, is that correct? It is 12.
Yes, at last count. So things sort of morph and change a little bit, but we're talking about, it was sort of 10 to 12. But yeah, it's in the region of 12. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. And the other question I do have, if we do pass this policy, maybe to Leah or the 151 officer, is there a possibility of a backdated legal challenge or not? Because I'm sorry I didn't attend the workshop. Basically for the public record.
What do you mean by a backdated legal
So
challenge?
if we pass this policy today, could somebody that has already been paying their own way go back for a legal challenge to claim that money back? Or is it from the date we set?
They could challenge it, but my view is that it would be very unlikely to succeed, in that we have independent legal advice which states very clearly that our existing policy is lawful and compliant, but it's a matter for the council whether or not it wants to change its policy moving forwards.
Okay, the reason I asked that question there was because, like Councillor Peacock, I've had a lot of people asking me, what about the backlash if you pass this policy? I think you've answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
I think Councillor Sims was
Okay,
first,
Councillor Sims. Thank you.
Yeah, well, firstly, I really echo John's comment. We do need to we need to stop disadvantaging the off-islanders as much as possible, and I think that's really important. And I'm very aware of all the social media comments on this, and I don't know if they don't understand it. I don't understand. I'm completely baffled why they make this. Some of the comments have come up there, because if you look at the alternative, there is no alternative. If somebody could come up with a better alternative to a situation which nobody likes, I mean, we would all like to recruit locally. We would all like all the officers to live here all the time. It's probably better for their mental health, or maybe it isn't. And it's certainly better for the economy of the islands, but it's not going to happen. It can't happen. And if we don't get people of the right calibre who can run quite an increasingly complicated system, then eventually the council will become dysfunctional, the government will step in, and we will lose our independence. And if we lose our independence, then essentially down the line we lose the islands, really, because if we became part of Cornwall, we'd be lucky to have one councillor who's never going to get near a cabinet position, couldn't advocate for the islands, and it would, on a value for money basis, Cornwall is going to spend money in Cornwall, not over here, and the islands will essentially disintegrate. And I think it would be virtually impossible to ever get another ministerial visit over here, given how much you have to push to get them. So the alternative to having an effective remuneration package for employees is just too grim to think about. So whilst I appreciate that the situation is not ideal and it's not what we like it to be, it's like it is, and I'm very, very happy to second these recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, then, please.
Thank you. Yeah, on the one hand, it seems pretty obvious to me that any businesses on the island, if they employ temporary workers or get workers over here, they're going to have to pay at least travel to get their employees here. There are interim workers here that carry out statutory roles who have said to me that it would not be worth their while doing the job if travel and accommodation would not be paid for by the council. These are roles that cannot be filled locally. I think it's true of any business on the island, so why should we be different? To think that people, whatever their wage, will take what amounts to a wage cut to work with us is fanciful at the very least. Furthermore, when we commission work from other organisations, whether public, private, companies or individuals, the uncontrollable cost of travel will be factored into the price we pay, whether that's overtly through expense claims or wrapped up in a contract, commissioning fee, or even a council tax precept. That cost will still be there. The other thing that's resident for me, and the comments on social media and the conversations I've had, is about the ownership or the social contract the council has with residents on the island, namely to ensure that we have a sustainable economy here. Austerity, shrinking budgets and advances in technology that allow us to connect remotely have all impacted the viability of small communities. It's good to hear the Chief Exec reiterating and strengthening the commitment to locally based on-island employment. I'd also ask that to be reiterated again in the policy, and it's a pity it's not more front and centre in the report. But I also ask for long-term accommodation tied to employment to be offered for jobs. This commitment also, in terms of the accommodation, comes with issue. I remember when I joined the council 16 years ago, Many of the conversations about housing were framed around the idea that too many council workers were housed and that the council should be prioritising others in need. We need to revisit that balance. I also think officers and roles need to be visible on the island and commit to spending periods of time here. Other public sector organisations do it, and so should we. Measures should be in place to ensure continuity of stay so that people understand the islands. I don't think this can be achieved on a fleeting overnight stay. Western Isles Council in Scotland also emphasises day return travel where possible to save costs, and that makes sense. But I would stress that efficiency must be balanced with the need for genuine presence and local knowledge. For key roles, a week-long stay may be necessary to build the understanding. To ensure credibility and public confidence, we also need monitoring. Orkney, for example, has internal audits of flight costs to keep their spending under control. I ask that we strengthen our own policy with similar measures, annual reporting, and an audit of travel and accommodation spend overseen by the lead member of finance. So my questions are these. Can officers ensure, reiterate and strengthen the policy that we are by preference an on-island employer? Can we strengthen recommendation 3 so that we build a portfolio of housing to offer staff and attract people to relocate? Not just working with partners, but actually investing in this ourselves. And how will this policy be monitored? I suggest internal audit, bring it to scrutiny yearly. That's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, I don't think I've got any brand new points to bring to the conversation, but I think judging in mind the public interest, I'll make some observations anyway. I totally agree with the comments about our independence. I think, well, I'm convinced the best way for the islands to be governed is by islanders themselves, locals like ourselves, surrendering our independence, going down the route with Cornwall, as Councillor Sims said, I think would just be a disaster in terms of the governance and the economic model of our islands. So I broadly want to encourage and safeguard our island-based workforce. I totally recognise the demographics that we have. If you take away the under-16s, the people who've retired, we're not left with a great deal of people to fill our statutory functions. I don't see hybrid working changing anytime soon. It's not going to go away. Post-COVID, it's sort of ramped up, and we have to recognise that we are a small organisation in a huge competitive bubble of recruitment and retention. I'm concerned about creating a 3-tier system of agency staff, mainland staff and locally based staff. I think that has the risk of being divisive, creating inequality, unfairness, even if it's just a perception. So I think we need to find that balance and bring people around a core Council of the Isles of Scilly workforce. I really want to do all we can to incentivise locals to be part of our workforce and to create that stability, which I know when I've been speaking to the likes of Ofsted in the past is something they're very keen to see. The transition of staff is challenging for all us as members as well as the workforce. It's the lived experience for me as well. Having members of staff who are living and working and participating in the community is hugely valuable. I think it gives the council an identity. I certainly support the comments about additional communications with staff as a result of this debate this morning. I recommend or take on board the points about scrutiny and review and the additional sort of safeguards and checks to make sure that things don't slip. Also the comments about off-island boating. We've just got to be careful, I think, in that discussion where we're having one discussion around off-island boating in one room and one about here. It's just trying to make sure those messages meet in the middle and don't create additional complexities. But I would just like to thank all our members of staff, wherever they live, wherever they work, whatever they're doing, because I think without them, so many of the services which we just take for granted just wouldn't exist. And I think that's why we now need to just recognise that going forward, we have these balances and these challenges. They're not easy decisions we need to have to make, but we have to make it, and I think this is probably the best we can hope for today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the debate, there are 3 points I would like to comment on from this report. Firstly, it has become quite apparent from face-to-face conversations, private messages, phone calls, emails and general comments that many in our community are far from happy with this change in policy. They have read the report but do not agree officers should be paid these expenses when many staff chose to leave the islands, nor pay expenses for new staff who will be employed from the mainland. They're concerned that there is a level of disconnect when council employees do not live in the community and experience the issues we face, and of course, the loss of substantial salaries spent and a job lost for someone who does live on the islands. Of course, we need the right person for the job, but apart from manual staff, we risk losing a large part of our workforce from the islands with this new policy, as it is not limited. Secondly, this report does not contain any firm costings, only assumptions. By agreeing to this change in policy, we would effectively be writing a blank cheque for future expenses. It is felt that we need a policy which should be encouraging loyalty, inclusion and connectivity to our community. Our staff are valued and we want everyone to feel a sense of belonging and purpose here, encouraging them to build a better future with us. Properties need to be retained for staff members, as we did previously. By selling them, we have now a problem of our own making, and this policy does not provide a good solution. Recommendation 3 regarding housing shortage is too vague and does not compel positive change. According to the interim HR officer, we are under the threat of staff retention issues if we do not pay this, but perhaps we should expect commitment from staff to our hard-working community whose taxes pay their generous salaries being enough to fund expenses. Having said this, it is understood that not all officers affected agree with the proposed policy, nor would they claim their expenses. Lastly, regarding recommendation 4, there is a serious concern that members have not been provided with an independent expert opinion regarding the tax position implications vis-à-vis the CEO/151 officer's proposed new working arrangement, which is cause for concern. The recommendations provided go against the strong wishes of much of the community, and for the reasons above, without their confidence, I cannot agree them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White, please.
Yes, thank you. I think what I'm going to say is going to echo some of what has already been said, but it's interesting to me the highlighting of the difficulty of inter-island boating and the costs there, particularly given those conversations around sort of funded boating for off-island families that we're having at the moment. And it does seem to highlight a dichotomy between an approach to the community and an approach to staff where we're looking at cutting spend to one area while committing to more on the other, but that is a separate issue and those conversations are ongoing. As others have said, we all want officers to be living here where possible, and that is spelt out extensively in the policy. You know, that is the council's position. You know, we have a unique local context, which as others members have said, you will only understand if you are in it, not visiting occasionally, but having spent significant time here, living here. However, that unique context does not, exempt us from UK employment law, which does give employees the right to request flexible working arrangements, including hybrid or remote working. And there are legitimate reasons, many of them, that new employees may not be able to move here, including housing, family life, or if they have care responsibilities for family members on the mainland. As others have said, the world has changed, particularly since the pandemic, and I understand the policy brings us in line with other local authorities. And I think the number of workarounds reached with different officers in different ways kind of indicates that the previous policy isn't working and hasn't worked. And it exposed us to tax liabilities that I believe cost us more than simply paying for the officers' travel and accommodation in the first place under the new policy guidelines. And I think it does serve to highlight as well that we need to be doing our utmost to develop local talent for those leadership roles in the future, which ties in to the workforce and skills strategy that we looked at earlier today and the work of Learn Silly. So I will support the recommendations, but understand the difficulties in doing so.
Thank you very much indeed. Monitoring Officer Leah, please.
I just wanted to address the point raised by Councillor Blackwell in terms of the legal advice regarding the tax position. So I had confirmed with Councillor Blackwell and all members prior to the meeting that the officers who have authored the report have obtained independent legal advice, including tax advice, and were satisfied with the same, in that the policy being put forward is compliant with employment legislation and is compliant with tax obligations.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
Councillor Dean was first, sorry.
Apologies, Councillor Dean.
Thank you. This is all very uncomfortable, it has to be said. The whole kind of direction of travel is very uncomfortable. As Councillor Blackwell said, the reaction in the community is completely understandable. I totally accept that there are positions that we struggle to fill, and we need to widen the net and get, you know, qualified people to fill those roles. However, I can't really get my head around this, because if we accept this policy, there is no going back. I mean, in theory there probably is, but you can't offer something and then, you know, in a year's time take it away again. And as Councillor Blackwell said about the blank cheque, that's the big worry. There's no limit to this. You know, you're saying there's at most 20 people that will work from the mainland and claim these expenses. I don't accept that. I think there's more than that. And I don't think there's anything stopping. Well, there's a level of management that was said to be a safety net to stop people requesting to work from home or move to the mainland. But once the precedent's been set, I don't know how you can refuse that, really. So I'm concerned on a kind of moral ground, because I think it's the wrong direction for the council. I think officers and staff need to be on the islands to experience life on the islands. And financially, I think it's really risky, because the cost can just go up and up and up. And I can't see that if we accept this policy that we'd be able to reverse it, and then we could get ourselves in all sorts of bother. So I can't support these recommendations. Apart from the one about housing, completely behind that. I think that's the solution, to find some tied accommodation on the islands with partners. We used to with the Duchy. We used to have properties that we rented long-term with the Duchy for senior officers. We did also have a chief executive house, which we don't have anymore. But we do have some property, some general fund housing that we could use. Maybe not suitable for senior management, but we have some housing, and I definitely think that's the way forward. And in the meantime, I know it's a problem, but I can't sign this blank cheque personally. So, anyway, I'll shut up.
Thank you. Sorry. Right. Thank you. Monitoring Officer Leah, please just come back.
I just wondered if it was an opportune moment to make it known that this Deputy Section 151 officer is joining the meeting remotely, and whether she is able to come in and provide any assurance to members in respect of the point raised about the blank cheque, because I appreciate within the appendices and the costs associated with the policy, there cannot be a definitive figure put on, but I just wonder if the Deputy Section 151 officer wanted to come in on that point.
Thank you. Tracy, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think in relation to that point, yes, the costings that are provided in the report are indicative, and that's because I know that flight prices could change, can fluctuate, but we have tried to just outline the frequency that would be expected for these posts that have been identified that would be applicable for the mainland. And I think some of the controls that we would have across the financials on this would involve some of the operational detail of how it's implemented. So we have this 40%. So for it to be considered a temporary place of work that falls within this policy, which Natalie can talk about a bit more if you need her to, it has to be less than 40% of their time spent at it, so that it is a temporary workplace. So that would be one control on it, that if people were needing to be on the island for more than 40% of the time, it would be considered to be a permanent place of work, and therefore it tips into a commuting, and then they would be funding it themselves. Or if the council funded it, then it would be considered a benefit in kind, and so we would then pick up the tax implications of that and treat it as such. We've also, so that's where we've looked at the frequency of it, we've restricted it to the number of posts, looked at the frequency, and then looked at what the average travel cost would be for those employees. And that's where, whilst we're saying it's an indicative cost, I'm hoping it, or my view on it is that it's a fairly realistic, robust indicative cost, but I'm not saying that that is the final cost, because I know that there are things that can fluctuate and change, and that we will then have the management controls and the operational processes that will sit beneath it to try and provide some of that assurance to officers and to members.
Yeah, if I could speak a little bit to those management controls as well. If we think about each journey, that an employee might do, within the policy is clearly set out that management approval would need to be gained prior to that travel. So each and every journey needs management approval before it happens. So there's an opportunity in every single journey for the council to make changes in what they want to approve and what they don't want to approve. So that management control exists as well. And just in terms of if we do get a flexible working request in from an employee to change their place of work, once again, that's a management decision about whether to grant or refuse that flexible working request. So there is that opportunity for the daily operational, management decisions, provide the opportunity to control cost, which again, as I say, I'll propose to bring to scrutiny on a regular basis so that you also can be assured that those controls are working effectively.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, so in terms of how we put friction on jobs leaving the island, how do we do that? What's the management controls? You say management controls are in place, but what are they?
So we have a flexible working request policy, and that's in line with the legislation around flexible working regulations. If an employee wanted to change their work base from being, on site to working remotely, something like that, they would need to put in their flexible working request. Managers would meet with them, consider the request, and provide a written outcome. Employees can appeal against that and somebody would hear the appeal, but there's a statutory process around an employee wanting to change their work base, and it requires management approval in order for that change to take place.
Okay, so even if we had a policy which says we are an on-island employer, some statutory way that we try and force people to work here, that's not legal. So it doesn't matter what we say here. If people want to do put in a flexible request for flexible working, they can. Is that correct? Or
that's a statutory right for all employees in the UK from day one of their employment, is people are able to put in a flexible working request if they wish to do so. And as I say, but we retain that management control in terms of the outcome of that and deciding, whether that's, feasible to approve or not. There are 8 statutory reasons why we could refuse a flexible working request. One of those is on the basis of cost. Also operational feasibility of the other 8, I can't remember off the top of my head, but one of those is definitely on cost. So if we had a request and we weren't able to accommodate it because of what the cost associated that will be, perhaps of travel, then that is within our management gift to refuse that request.
okay, so that speaks to me about being just like you've said in the policy. At the start of the policy, council actively encourages applicants for all roles to reside on the islands. Believe that locally based workforce strengthens community ties, enhances service delivery. We need to, etc., etc. We just need to make sure that is on all adverts, and make sure that branding and that on-island employer policy is foremost on all propaganda, I was going to say, on all adverts and things. So, we have to make sure it's there. And I just wanted to make sure, Chairman, that I'm going to propose an amendment to recommendation 3, and that we can come back to that later on, if that's right.
Thank you. I just want to bring Nicola, Director, in, please.
It's just a quick point really about how this links in workforce planning. So I think for me, what we've got to think about is our capacity and capability on island. And I think we've already talked at a great length previously about the need for this council to invest in its existing employees and for people on island to get the right skills necessary for the workplace that's provided here. So to me, this goes alongside alongside the housing issues and resolving those, but also in investing in our own staff to bring them up to standard. I don't want to point to any particular people, but there are a number of people who've risen through the ranks here, up to heads of service level and beyond, where we've got people who came in at a very junior level and we've invested in them. And I think that's a really good method of growing that capability and capacity on island. And we must continue to do so as we look at our budgets moving forward, is invest in our own staff through training, appropriate training at the right time.
Thank you. Monitoring Officer Lear, did you want to come in?
I'll come in after all of the councillors, if I may.
Okay.
I was just going to pick up some of the points and suggest some changes to recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
Yeah, I'm slightly bemused by the term blank cheque. It strikes me as hyperbole, really. It's if we pass this policy, then the council's going to get consumed in a financial inferno of expenses claims. Surely, is it any more or less a blank cheque than the previous thing? I mean, I just don't see it at all. And also, it suggests that we pass this policy, then we have no control, and there's nothing we can do about it. And anybody who says we want this money, we're just going to have to dish it out. It's silly. I think that's I cannot see that this would make any substantial difference on the basis of blank cheque, and I don't want to repeat my previous points, but essentially I would say that if you get somebody, they're good for the job, would you like to do, and they get offered a sufficient financial remuneration, and then they're told that, you realise that you're going to have to pay £35,000 a year or whatever in order to get to the job, are you still prepared to take it? And they say yes. You wouldn't employ them because they're really an idiot. So that's it, really.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, just another point of clarity. This 40% rule worries me as well, because we're basically limiting the amount of time someone can come to the island, and there's other restrictions there saying it's got to be for a temporary purpose for them to come here. So it seems like we're encouraging people to not be here in this policy, which completely goes against what we've all talked about, how we want people to be here on island doing their work and experiencing living on the island. So this 40% rule one, I think, is a bit of a con, to be honest, because if we're restricting that, that's just tax dodging a bit, not illegal, but just a bit iffy. And we're also encouraging people to not be here, which doesn't sit very comfortably.
I'm happy to come in on that one, unless Tracy, you would wish to respond on that one. Yeah. What we're looking to do is to put in place a policy that will achieve the objectives, but at least cost to the council. And achieving a tax efficient policy, tax efficient position is what we're looking to do. So clearly, if tax is due, we'll be tax compliant, and of course we would pay whatever tax was due. But yeah, there's a reason behind those policy suggestions, which is just to help us with the cost control for the policy to minimise our tax liability.
But we are telling people, if we employ them from the mainland, that we only want them to come here less than 40% of the time. That's what the policy is saying, correct?
Yeah, and to be clear, if they were travelling for more than 40% of the time, the HMRC rules indicate, this is the tax and legal advice that Leah referred to earlier on, that would then become a permanent workplace and it would become commuting. So if the council were to be funding commuting, that then is a benefit in kind, P11D, tax liability then falls due. So that's the reason why it's proposed in that way. Is just to make sure that it's efficient as well as providing the skills that the council needs.
But we are discouraging people from spending more than 40% of their working time here, aren't we?
For the reasons I've just outlined.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock was next, please.
I made way so Leah could, because Leah put her light on.
Sorry, I was just going to come in on the 40%, if I may. So, in respect of the 40%, again, just in clarification to an issue that Councillor Blackwell raised prior to the meeting, I made clear that if there was an employee who was required for the purposes of their role to be on island for more than 40%, of course, they would fall outside of this policy and we would comply with all tax, etc., related to them then commuting instead of travelling. So that's clear. In terms of key roles that you already have, so for example, when we've looked at some analysis of senior officers who work on the mainland and how often they spend on island, most of those spend less than 40% on island. I think Natalie's done a piece of work around that. So for example, you wouldn't see a marked difference in terms of senior leadership who live on the mainland coming across to the island. So I just think it's important to make that point.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock was next.
I'd like to table a recommendation, if I may, that we have a list of indicative roles that this council would make the assumption would be hybrid. So they would be similar to the list already here. That would be placed in an appendix to the policy, so we are able to change that appendix without having to come back to the policy. So the policy stands, we have an appendix that we can alter with indicative roles that state, for example, the list as in on page 234 for the people we already have working for us would be people we would expect to be able to do hybrid roles. And then when a member of staff comes forward to say, is our legal right, I wish to go and work on the mainland, we can say, well, hang on a minute, you're not actually on the list of indicative roles, we will look at it, but it will, it will not be so easy for them to achieve that. And that then gets away from this concern, which I think is very valid from Councillor Dean and the other councillor there, that, sorry, only because I forgot your name, no, use your second name. Sorry, I didn't lose my flow now. But basically, to get us away from this concern that anybody working for the council could automatically apply to move to the mainland if they wish to, I expect them to be able to continue in their role, even if the role they were doing wasn't necessarily one that they would be able to do from the mainland, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Monitoring officer, Leah?
I just think we're crossing over into the operational of implementing the policy. I think that becomes very difficult. I was going to suggest a couple of alterations to the recommendations. I don't know if members want me to do that now or at a later point, which might cover some of those points.
Yeah, would you like to do that then, please?
So in terms of the recommendations that are before members, I'll just get my paper up. Apologies. Yeah. Waiting for Councillor Marcus to return.
Okay. Right, thank you.
So just going through the recommendations with some suggested amendments. So recommendation 1 as drafted, recommendation 2 as drafted, recommendation 3, both Councillor Marcus and Councillor Blackwell wanted that to be strengthened in terms of housing. So I don't know if this works. So at the end of the recommendation, after the word services, to include such work to include implementing an operational policy covering the utilisation of all available council properties for the use by off-island and mainland employees. In terms of recommendation 4, as drafted, and then 2 additional recommendations which address some points raised by Councillor Marcus, Peacock, Nixon and Blackwell. So a recommendation 5, that delegated authority be provided to the head of HR or the interim head of HR to make minor amendments to the recruitment, selection and promotions policy, which could include, for example, some operational points that Councillor Peacock's raised. And in terms of new recommendation 6, that the recruitment, selection and promotion policy be reviewed in the first 12 months of its operation and brought before scrutiny committee and then on to full council.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, are you happy with those amendments to the recommendations?
I would say that recommendation 6, we need to include something about internal audit monitoring costs as part of that report, maybe. And then recommendation 3, I would also like the word build a portfolio in there. With but build a portfolio of housing for council employees with partners. Yes.
Monitoring officer, have you got Councillor Marcus's comments there? Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing that raises for me is the audit function moved to governance, didn't it, and not to scrutiny?
Yeah.
So if you're wanting audit to do a piece of work, it would then properly come to governance committee and then on to full council.
I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, are you happy with these amendments?
Yes, will they be taking individually?
We'll be taking them individually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll vote on the amendments in a moment, but we'll just take other councillors first, because I know Councillor Legg is waiting and so is Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just a plea, and it probably goes without saying, that the managers who are requesting the specific need for officers to come to the islands should be mindful to try and group things together, so we don't have a situation where officers are needed on the island on a Tuesday and a Thursday and then have to either travel back to the mainland and work up from home on a Wednesday to reduce their time requirements. So we may need to consider meeting times to make that efficient.
Yeah, I'm sure we can do that. Thank you, Councillor Legg. Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, so in similar to Councillor Legg's comment, where we do have a small number of employees on the mainland and we do require them to come across, all managers should be mindful that it's bringing them across for a business need, not just as a nice to have. We don't want wasted trips. Ideal is to have everyone sitting in an office together from time to time. If it's not business critical, it shouldn't become the day-to-day just because you want to have people in. I was going to suggest as well, obviously people have always had the right to work from home, to put in flexible working applications. If we are going to try and tighten down on that, we need to be mindful that we can't just identify posts that say can't put a flexible working application in. Applications for flexible working may be working for the mainland, they may be just changes of hours, there may be all kinds of reasons, so we need to make sure we don't close any of those avenues off to people. And perhaps we need to ensure that all flexible working applications, or at least any that mention relocation, get escalated to a senior manager. I'm not sure exactly where on the scheme they sit at the moment for who can approve them or not, but just if we do have concerns for mass exodus to the mainland, then perhaps we just need to tidy that bit up as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need any of that monitoring officer in the recommendations, or can we deal with that separately?
I mean, that's a matter if members are wanting something, but in terms of a lot of what Councillor Nixon's talked about, it is covered in 9.4 of the report in terms of how the policy would be implemented operationally.
Fine. Okay, thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Nixon? Yes. Yeah, thank you. So, members, you've heard the amendments to the recommendations and the addition of 2 recommendations. We're going to take these separately. Is everybody clear and happy about that, or does Councillor Blackwell?
Sorry, would you mind reading 5 and 6 again, Leah?
So 5 was that delegated authority be provided to the interim head of HR to make minor amendments to the recruitment, selection and promotions policy. 6 was that, so this is changed because of Councillor Marcus's further conversation, that the recruitment, selection and promotions policy be reviewed in the first 12 months of its operation and brought before Governance Committee and then full Council following audit undertaking work on the costings of the policy.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add a point as well, which Nicola's raised, which is on the amendment to recommendation 3, that we have to specify it's all available general fund council properties. It can't be all council properties.
Thank you very much indeed. So could I have a proposer, please, for those amended and additional recommendations? Councillor Nixon, seconder, please. Councillor Peacock, all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. So we'll now go back to each of the recommendations. So first of all, recommendation 1. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Peacock, seconder. Councillor Nixon, all those in favour? Okay, any against? Okay, any abstentions? So that recommendation is carried. Thank you. Recommendation 2. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Nixon, seconder. Councillor Sims. All those in favour? Any against? That motion is also carried. That recommendation is carried. Sorry, I didn't ask. Any abstentions from that? No.
Councillor Dean wants to come in, Chair, sorry.
Sorry?
Yeah, just for the next recommendation, if you could read out the amended one, please.
Thank you. So, recommendation 3. Could you like to read it out again then, please, Leah?
So, as drafted, and then added on to the end of it, such work to include implementing an operational policy covering the utilisation of all available general fund council properties for the use by off-island and mainland employees.
Can we add something in there about partners as well? Because the Duchy may well be able to help us with some accommodation. They have done in the past. Does it? Oh, beg your pardon. Oh, beg your pardon. Okay.
So recommendation 3, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marcus, seconded Councillor White. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 4, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Sims, seconder. Councillor Peacock. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Recommendation 4 is carried. Thank you. Recommendation 5, a proposer, please. Councillor White, seconder. Councillor Nixon. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried as well. Thank you. And lastly, item 6. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marcus. Seconded Councillor White. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much to Natalie and to Tracy and to Leah for your work on this paper.
Thank you.
Chair, my apologies, I have to leave as I have other commitment at 12 o'clock today, so I won't be here for part 3.
Thank you very much, Councillor Legg. So, item 18 is for information only. We now move into part 3, which is the exclusion of the public for item 19. That under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of that Act as amended, being information about the business affairs of particular persons. Could I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Sims, seconder. Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you.